politics lead. Republicans are seizing on the heavily redacted affidavit to accuse the Justice Department of a midterm political hit on Donald Trump, even as the affidavit and other legal documents show evidence of a long-term effort that started well before the August 8th search to get back documents that Trump had taken from the White House. Let's bring in New York Times senior political correspondent Maggie Haberman and Spectrum News political anchor Errol Louis. Thank you both so much for being here. Maggie, I read with interest the piece that you put out yesterday about the, shall we say, perplexing legal strategy that the Trump team is employing here. You write, quote, the legal arguments put forth by his team sometimes strike lawyers not involved in the case as more about setting a political narrative than about dealing with the possibility of a federal prosecution. So why are they handling the investigation this way?
I think there's a couple of reasons, Casey, but one is that Donald Trump tends to act as his own strategic advisor, comms director, and sometimes lawyer. And so, I mean, we write in that story, if you read some of his legal actions over time, they sometimes read as if he dictated them. They read like rally addresses that are, he is scripting. And he has, over time, had a lot of lawyers who have a hard time pushing back on him or who are eager to please him. And I think you are seeing a fair amount of that. One of the things that's been perplexing that they've done, and this I do think is him as well, they've actually been very slow in their responses on this. They were very slow to ask for a special master in the search and what was taken. Then when they did, they didn't ask for a special master for attorney-client privilege. It was for executive privilege, which the current administration has already said doesn't apply to him. So this is part of why it all looks as if it is about something other than the legal aspects of this as opposed to the political one.
Right. It seems like the stakes are higher than they have ever been for him, though. I mean, I take your point about the parallels.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no question. I mean, he is continuing to act as if this is the same thing as everything else that he has dealt with. Investigations before he was president, investigations while he was president. He's not president anymore, and so he's not protected by the office. He doesn't have sort of the support of the office and the constitutional armor of the office, and I think that he has not quite realized that yet.
And the fact that he doesn't have it is in a lot of ways why the Justice Department, I think, is moving in the way that it has, because they can't afford to start taking these kind of actions, searching his home, for example, while he's a declared candidate for president. And so in some ways, they've speeded up the timeline in part to prevent exactly where we see this going, which is it turning into a political debate rather than a legal one.
But I do think it's important to note something actually that you talked about when we were starting this conversation. His folks have said, yes, this is a witch hunt. This is an unfair search. The Justice Department has tried very hard to document the ways in which he stalled, resisted, didn't do what they were asking him to do in terms of returning documents. He has argued that he declassified everything. They've shown no evidence of that at all. The statutes that were used in the search warrant aren't even about classified material. And so you have seen all of this back and forth, and the Trump people have tried to paint this as we were so cooperative. We've been working with the Justice Department. These are long negotiations, and you can see very clearly from the Justice Department's perspective that is not at all the case.
Right. So this is all, of course, taking place along the backdrop of the midterm elections, which, I mean, many Republicans have talked about the investigation in the context of this. But it's also, I think, and many of the Republican sources that I've talked to, think that perhaps having him in the news is leading to increased pessimism. And CNN is now reporting that House Republicans are getting more and more pessimistic about their chances of winning at least a massive majority in the midterm election, which had been something of an expectation. I mean, everyone I've talked to is they're still confident that they're going to retake the House. Obviously, Nancy Pelosi has a very narrow majority right now, and the map is favorable. Historical trends are favorable. But some of Kevin McCarthy's allies are on edge about his future. I would argue there's many reasons for him to be on edge about his future, but I think it's gotten a little more acute in recent days. I mean, what do you make of all of this?
You put all of the eggs in one basket, and they did as a party. They said pretty much formally at their last convention that we stand for whatever it is Donald Trump tells us we stand for. You put all your eggs in one basket, you better not drop the basket. And in this case, you've got multiple investigations into Donald Trump. You've got he's got problems with his popularity. He's got legal problems. He's got commercial legal problems. He's got political legal problems. And so it doesn't look as certain as it did before. But you're absolutely right. I mean, they need net, 5 seats, 6 seats? And on average, since World War II, the president's party loses 26 seats. So even if they half perform, they're going to be fine as far as getting a majority. But they have great reason to be concerned because every amount of polling that we can look at says that people like the Constitution. People like the rule of law. People don't think that ex-presidents should be able to steal or appropriate federal documents or secret documents and not turn it back. And so they're going to have to live and die with Donald Trump. That was the decision they made. And as we can already see, it's not going to go as easy in the midterms as they might have hoped.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think Mitch McConnell knows and has tried to remind everyone in his orbit is that Donald Trump lost the election, and he thinks that he could still be a big loser for the party. Maggie, I do want to ask you, though, about one other piece of this, and some of the reason why Democrats are optimistic. It doesn't have to do with Donald Trump at all. In fact, it's about Roe versus Wade, overturning it, how that shaped the political environment. And several Republicans in close races seem to be, if not moderating their positions, then at least adjusting them in public. The latest example is from a Michigan Republican. This is Tom Barrett. Take a look. On the left is the values section that he removed from his website. It had touted his anti-abortion stance. Instead, he replaced it with a life section attacking his opponent as being extreme, quote unquote, on abortion, and only briefly mentioning that he is pro-life. I mean, what is your take on the way Republicans are recalibrating here and what it means?
I think with some exceptions, you are generally seeing Republicans in generally statewide contests, less so, in hard right districts, more conservative districts, more red districts, for House races, who are recognizing that having a very, very hard right position against abortion does not actually play that well in a general election. And there is an aspect to which having undone Roe v. Wade for conservatives is the dog that caught the car. And it's not really clear what you do when that happens. I remember hearing from strategists among Republicans a few months ago, this probably isn't going to matter that much. Well, that's not true. It actually has mattered a great deal. And they have still not figured out what their answer is. But you are right that the combination of Dobbs, and it's not just a political theoretical at this point, it's that you can point to various laws in various states. You can point to actions that are being taken against mothers, not just women who are in search of abortion, but in terms of prenatal care and after effects that have not been thought of when this law was undone nationally. And so I think you are seeing this combination of post-Dobbs energy animating Democrats in a big way, combined with Donald Trump reemerging as an issue. Right now, that looks very good for Democrats. It's August, but we have seen at least some early signs that that is going to play out in Democrats' favor.
No, I mean, the reality is, and it's a very good point, a lot of these state laws are out of step with. There may be a majority of Americans who are willing to place some limits.
That's right.
On abortion, but these laws are much more extreme than the vast majority support. Errol Louis, Maggie Haberman, thank you both very much for being here. We really appreciate it.